Former U.S. President Donald Trump has won the New Hampshire First in America primaries. With this, Trump has established himself as the first choice of Republicans and has cleared his path for Republican nomination at the outset. But rival Nikki Haley, who is Trump's lone challenger in the race, says that the competition is far from over. Well, numbers so far show Donald Trump sweeping the Republican competition and also delivering a fresh setback to his rival Nikki Haley. The magnitude of Trump's victory is still coming into focus, but the lead is not as much as what was seen in Iowa. Nikki Haley has closed the gap on Trump in the head-to-head New Hampshire race. Out of the 24% votes counted in the Republican race so far, 53% are in Trump's support, while 45% voters back Haley. Haley was counting on moderates and independents in the state who outnumber the registered party members to pull off an upset for Trump. Haley has declared that she will not quit the presidential nomination race, even if she loses New Hampshire to Trump. Haley came third in the Republican race in Iowa last week. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who came second in Iowa, has quit the race and decided to support Trump instead. Trump won a crushing victory in the first competition in Iowa last week, with initial results showing Trump in the lead. He seems to be guaranteeing his presidential nomination. No Republican has ever won both the opening competitions and not secured the party nomination. Republican primaries will send 22 bound delegates to the party's national convention. They will be voting whether for Haley or Trump as per the results from the states. In the Democrats' camp, incumbent President Joe Biden is leading with close to 80% majority as a write-in candidate. An internal party dispute over the primaries date led Biden off the ballot paper. National Democrats made South Carolina the first official state on its nominating calendar, but New Hampshire's party chose to stick with Tuesday's state-run primary. No delegates will be awarded from the competition. And joining us on this broadcast, we have with us Jonna Black, former foreign policy advisor to President Joe Biden, who advised Biden for 9 years on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And we also have with us a correspondent, Susan Tehrani. She's joining us live from New York. Thanks very much for joining us here on WION. My first question is for you, Susan. Donald Trump has won the New Hampshire competition. Talk to us about how that cements Trump in the race for the White House.
Yeah, Donald Trump made history as the first candidate in the United States to win New Hampshire 3 times. And as you mentioned, in the last 50 years, the only Republican candidate after Gerald Ford in 1976 to win the Iowa caucus and then New Hampshire as well. This puts Donald Trump in the lead and really turbocharges his election campaign moving forward. Going into South Carolina, Nikki Haley's home state, where he is again leading by a large margin. We were wondering whether or not Nikki Haley would continue. As we saw, Nikki Haley says that she's not backing down. Some believe that MAGA America, at least, believes that that's not the right choice, that it's eventual, that she has to back down and support Donald Trump. But then you have the Never Trumpers and Haley supporters who believe that, you know, there is a viable alternative path moving forward, perhaps, against the former president.
Right, Susan, I was just coming to that what comes next for Nikki Haley? She clearly earlier said that even if she loses New Hampshire, it is not going to be game over. Do you see Haley lasting until the primary in her home state, South Carolina?
I'm sorry, is this to me?
South Carolina is her home state, you know, going forward. Oh, I'm sorry.
Please go ahead. I'm not sure who the question is to.
Right. My question is for you, Susan, that I was just coming to the point you made there, that Haley says that even if she loses New Hampshire, it is not going to be game over. Do you see Haley lasting until the primary in her home state? My question is for you, Susan. Yes.
Well, you know, the primary, the South Carolina primaries are about 3 weeks away. Many believe that ultimately she's really risking this, facing really punishing ads from Donald Trump in her home state. You have Senator Tim Scott supporting her. Donald Trump brought more than a dozen South Carolina politicians on stage during one of his campaign events supporting him. It's very difficult for a governor in her own home state not to have the support that, Haley is just basically not enjoying. Now, what will happen? Will her donors stand behind her? Does she think she has a path forward? Perhaps just, stick around even after South Carolina if she is close to Donald Trump? Do they think that perhaps the former president might get a conviction? There may be an opening there for her. We'll have to wait and see what her plans are. But she's going into South Carolina in really risky territory.
Right, Susan, thanks very much for joining us here on WION. Let's also now hear to what Nikki Haley had to say after Trump's victory in New Hampshire. Take a listen.
I want to congratulate Donald Trump on his victory tonight. He earned it. And I want to acknowledge that. Now, you've all heard the chatter among the political class. They're falling all over themselves, saying this race is over. It's not over. Well, I have news for all of them. New Hampshire is first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation. This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go.
Mr. Black, thank you so much for waiting with us here today. I want to ask the same question to you. We just heard Nikki Haley saying that New Hampshire is not the only state. Talk to us about how she has clearly lamented that even if she loses New Hampshire, it is not going to be game over.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. I think that it is game over whether Nikki Haley realizes it or not. New Hampshire was really her best shot at winning any state. And if she stays in until South Carolina, she's very likely to lose, and it will be very humiliating for her. It may really hurt both her political and her financial options moving forward. So my guess is that she'll stay in as long as she has her donors' money flowing in, but I don't think it's going to be that long.
Ms. Black, you've also served under U.S. President Joe Biden for 9 years. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden is not on the 2024 New Hampshire primary ballot. Why is that, and what does it mean for the primary election?
Well, first, what it means is almost nothing. Why is he not on the ballot? That's because of a rule change in the Democratic Party that removed Iowa and New Hampshire as the locked-in first-off states on the primary calendar. And the reason that this was changed is that for decades, these two utterly unrepresentative states, which are almost entirely white and do not really reflect the diversity either of the Democratic Party or of the country as a whole, have essentially determined the nominees. And President Biden, among many other Democrats, thought that that was not the best policy moving forward.
Right, Mr. Black, now, New Hampshire is a small state in the U.S. Talk to us on how its primaries are crucial in choosing the next U.S. president.
Well, we've got a really strange political system in America. It's strange in a lot of ways. One of them is that New Hampshire, this very small state, has decided solely on its own and written into its state constitution that it will always be the first primary in the nation. Nobody other than the voters of New Hampshire have any say in that, and they basically have determined it. We have a very decentralized system in America in a lot of ways. So the short answer is of why has this happened? Because we have a very strange system that does not always lead to optimal results.
Mr. Black, my last question to you. Do you think Trump's resounding victory both in the Iowa caucuses and now we've witnessed New Hampshire, does that somewhat put Biden in a spot for the White House race?
No, I don't think so. Trump is very firmly in control of the Republican Party, but that's been clear for, I would say, at least a year, ever since he recovered from the 2022 midterms. He firmly controls the Republican Party, but he is still widely unpopular. President Biden is also pretty unpopular. However, about half the country is likely to vote for Joe Biden, and about half the country is likely to vote for Donald Trump. And the margin between the two of them is going to be very, very close. And we're not going to know exactly what that margin is going to be right up until Election Day.
All right, Mr. Black, thanks very much for joining us here on WION and sharing insights with us.
Thank you for having me.